On today's episode, I interview LaSean Smith. Wow, this guy is smart, highly intelligent, and has a lot of experience in technology. He's going to talk about artificial intelligence, probably in a way that you haven't seen in the news, and it was refreshing for me. He also talks a lot about business process and the documentation of that. I know that sounds dry, but it's not. The way he explores it honestly has me rethinking some of the things I need to do in my own businesses because it was that insightful. This is definitely gonna be one of those podcasts that you want to go listen to and then go back and listen to again, because he drops knowledge bomb after knowledge bomb after knowledge bomb, and he's just a really cool dude. So I think you're going to enjoy this one as well. LaSean is a business creator and software developer who helps people navigate their entrepreneurial journey. He's the founder of the investment firm CAGR, which of course stands for Compound Annual Growth Rate. After spending over a decade as a software executive at Amazon and Microsoft, he uncovered patterns to use process as a tool to win in business more often. So yes, you want to listen to this podcast. He can help you win more often. He's consulted a wide range of clients, including Electronic Arts, Sony, T-Mobile, Target, Tom Shoes, and Warner Brothers Studios, just to name a few. His expertise in AI, behavioral economics, and system engineering creates a unique talent stack for solving many of today's most challenging business problems. He also has a book. His product strategy book called Values-Based Business Design is an Amazon bestseller and explores how to develop high-growth products in the modern global marketplace. Like I said, he has done a lot. So, LaSean, with that, welcome to the ThriveMore podcast.
Hey, Roger. Happy to be here. Thanks for the opportunity. And let's have a fun conversation.
Absolutely. Love it. That's the only kind we want to have here. The only kind we want to have. So, you had this really varied background. And before we dive in, I know when I listen, I always want to know what the genesis story is. Kind of how did you arrive today here on this podcast with that wall of books behind you and this, this incredible amount of wisdom that you've accrued over the years? Kind of how did it start? Just give us your background story synopsis, if you could.
Right. Well, first off, I'll say, I got to tumble a lot, right? You got to fail a lot to hopefully find some wins. But if we go kind of way back, I've just had two consistent passions. One has been, creating new worlds with the computer. And when I think about what writing code is, that's how I articulate it. And the other is media production. Everything from music to films. And over the years, my journey has been some intersection of those two. I don't have really a discipline focus. I started as a software engineer, went into product design after business school. I was a product manager, but those titles aren't really, to me, that important. I really am more anchored on what type of problems am I solving and for what type of customers. And so the journey has been me spending 2 or 3 years looking at a particular problem space, opportunity, trying to start a new business inside of a big company, starting a new business as an entrepreneur. And through all of that, it's just compounded to numerous lessons. But as you would expect, there have been many, many failures. One of my proudest moments is a salad business that I started. And at the time, there wasn't a great model I could follow. Here where I live in Seattle, there's a couple of great businesses now that they only sell salads. When I say only, obviously they got cookies and the chips and what have you.
Sure.
But I was like, I'm a smart guy. I'm going to create this brand. I'm going to go create the recipe design. I'm going to go have amazing apps for ordering. And, in 2 or 3 years, I'm going to have the, SOPs, the, kind of my operating procedures all sorted out. And this is going to be a great franchise platform. And come look at me. And one of my proudest moments is this little screenshot I have, which is the Yelp entry for that business. It was called Fine Salads. And it says permanently closed because we went out of business. And the reason it's so, to me, is so valuable is, I've been fortunate to show up and contribute to teams where we've done, what folks would say are very successful things. But sometimes, kind of everything went right in our favor. And I can't say I learned a ton to make that repeatable. But, some of these other experiences where they didn't go as expected, I've kind of learned the most. And some of those, those kind of like touching the oven type moments where it's like, oh, I really need to kind of, formalize a set of tenets and principles on how I tackle certain things. And so the journey has been a winding road. And, now as an investor, I really try to figure out ways to help my operators or people I'm just mentoring to kind of avoid some of my pitfalls.
Wow. I appreciate so much that you started off with that story, because I have talked on this show with so many people about failure being the greatest teacher, if not the only teacher, because when we win, you said, like, you're in my brain, which is kind of freaky, that, we don't really learn anything other than winning's fun. Okay, winning's fun, but we didn't really learn. It's the scar tissue. It's the lessons that we get from failing. I know you had I believe you had a career in the military, or some time in the military as well. Were you, if I ask, were you an athlete before that at all?
I was not an athlete, but one of the things I've learned, I look for folks who have former military service, who have been in competitive sports, because I find, there's kind of this kind of focus on the destination, the accomplishment, and the rigor and the discipline. But one of the things I learned from the military, I would say two things that are really important. Number one was just really systems-oriented thinking. That's kind of become something that's been woven throughout my career. But two is, really how to think about, your personal mindset and how that interacts with teams. And it's, whether you get it in a 2-week boot camp or, some other way, I think it's a great piece to add to our experience.
Yeah. I asked that question because I found with military and or athletes, boot camp, it is set up so you will fail. You have to, it's going to push you to the brink.
Right.
And so many military drills do that so that you're prepared when the worst could go wrong. You're ready for it. And that failure,
you don't see that as a failure state when you're at your low.
There you go. And I think in business, too many times, if you fail, people feel they get put in, especially in corporate America, you get put in a box and, you failed. Where in sports, in the military, in entrepreneurship, failure is like, okay, I figured out what not to do. That means I've progressed. I figured out what not to do. So I love that you started off with that, with the fine salad story. That's fantastic. Your personal North Star is 6 words: know thyself, make things, stay free. I'd love if you could expand upon that.
Yeah, well, first off, I know for your audience, as folks maybe are at the early stages of their entrepreneurial journey, or maybe they're, still exploring where they might make the leap and the commitment. As we, acknowledge our skill set, our experience, our values, if you kind of look at your unique skill stack, most of us have a lot of options, right? And that's a fortunate place to be, that we could do a number of different things. We could have different jobs we could take. We could start different businesses. Sometimes that creates anxiety because it's like, there's so many, which one are you going to stick to? But for me, what I found is I have to have a North Star so I know what to say no to. And it's not just people who are distracting me. I'm distracting myself, right? I'll see some shiny new toy and I'm like, oh, that looks really interesting. And, I'm in a fortunate position with kind of the way my schedule is structured that, I could wander off for 2 weeks and, just kind of like call it work, but I'm not really producing anything of value to whoever my customer might be. And so I use this to make sure I don't get off track. And so the first sentence, on I have to know who I am. I kind of stole "know thyself" from that Greek piece. If there's any fans of Christopher Nolan who watched Tenet, that's kind of woven all in that film. But I say know thyself because there are many times I've been presented with opportunities. They're not for me, even though they are great, and I have to filter them early on. Let's not get on a bunch of calls. Let's not waste each other's time. It's not for me. I can move on. And the next is make things. As I got further in my career, I started, went from team leader to a people manager to organizational leader. I kept getting further away from like actually making the thing that I showed up to do. And for some folks, that's the goal, right? They can create more leverage and have more impact if they are managing a team of folks who are, building great things. For me, it was just energy draining, and it remains energy draining when I get too far away from the actual making of it. And so it's just a reminder, again, not good or bad, but for my personality, I need to feed that. And then the last thing is I love to move without permission. If I am going to, kind of stumble, I want it to be because I didn't do something properly. I don't want it because a gatekeeper told me I could not. And so I love the idea of, all right, LaSean, you got 3 options. Which one of these leaves you in control? It also forces me to be accountable, because then if I fail, I don't have anybody to direct the blame towards other than myself. Like, dude, you didn't do it. And so the other piece around that I love about a short North Star is, one, it's easy to remember, but I like them to kind of compete a little bit, right? And so while I love to make things, there's all sorts of opportunities where I could actually find myself in an environment where I'm not in control because someone's, invested in me or given me some money or done what have you. And so I also kind of use them as kind of a checks and balance. But in general, it's a rubric for, number one, what opportunities to say no to, and then number two, this sounds very tactical, but this is a huge part of my productivity system, is how to manage my calendar. And I look at my calendar as, the way we spend dollars out of a bank account. I think we spend minutes out of our kind of time budget. And so if I look at that and I start seeing patterns, like why am I saying yes to this meeting, or why am I scheduling this time, or why am I reading this book over here? Like, again, sometimes it's my own doing, and that North Star kind of keeps me honest.
Funny you say that about books. I talked about this recently. When I had, for the longest time, if I started a book, I had to finish it, even if the book was terrible, and then I finally realized, why am I giving my most precious resource, time, to this book that's not very good? I've read a lot of great books, but it's just funny. I would force myself to get through a very mediocre book, and I finally quit doing that. It only took me 50 some years to do that.
Yeah.
You've also written about being driven by 3 tenets. Can you speak to those, and how did you land on those 3?
Are we talking about at the company level or the personal level?
Oh, good. Thanks for the clarity. I think it'd be more interesting to hear about the personal level. It really would.
Yeah. So the idea of, there's all sorts of labels, morphisms, tenets, values. The reason I wrote a book on values-based business design, and it's values plural, right? Our values, not our value proposition. And the reason I believe that's so important is, in today's world, there's so many options that are, what I'll call, easy to sacrifice when times get hard, right? So we've been in places where there's culture posters, or there's some marketing campaign, so-and-so or such and such topic is in vogue. And so everybody piles on and does their seasonal campaign to promote that ideal. What I call a value and what I call a tenet is something that you're willing to go out of business to protect. And so at the business level, like, this is legit something that you would rather not be in business, return cash to shareholders and shut it down, even if the shareholders yourself. And on the personal side, it's something that you are willing to effectively sacrifice all else to protect. And one of those for me is, and it's probably the most important, is to love your customer. And the reason that is so important is I found myself in many points in my life where, folks are like, "Oh, LaSean, you're crushing it. You're doing so well." And if I was really honest with myself, I was serving, executives or large enterprises. And I'm like, I really just don't care if these companies win or lose. Sure. And, when you get to the actual humans in many of those businesses, they can be quite interesting, but it's just the connection was not there. And I had to really work to figure out why certain projects or products that I worked on were giving me energy or not. And so this idea that you have to love your customer is really critical. I think it's also important for people who are aspiring entrepreneurs to think about. When I share my experiences, I don't think people will take it as prescriptive advice. I hope not, because all of our journeys are different. But hopefully, they can kind of see some patterns in the anecdotes and say, "Oh, maybe there's a way for me to ask a question of myself through that story that LaSean shared." And so when I look at that, that statement, "Love your customer," I find that sometimes people have come to me, they probably come to you as well, and say, all right, what's the fastest growing industry? What's the best such and such franchise? What's like they're looking for some hack or some cheat code. And my response is, listen, no matter what you pick, at some point it's going to suck, as an entrepreneur. Like it's just going to get hard. So you better pick something that gives you energy with a customer that you care about. Because that's going to allow you to stick it out and survive and thrive. Because otherwise, you're just going to get harder. You're going to quit. And so if you love your customer, it means you've done the work to explore who is your customer. But the secondary benefit of that is you're going to spend time with them. You're going to build a relationship, right? We wouldn't have a personal relationship with someone that says like, hey, you're the most valuable person in my life. But I don't call you. I don't hang out. I only see you every 2 or 3 years. Like, no, that's not that you would not say that's your most valuable relationship. You would put in work to that. And professionally, I think we should attempt to do something similar, where we want a customer base that we deeply care about. And if you find yourself, where that's not the case, I think it's worth asking the question, is that the audience you really want to focus on? And then lastly, there is really understanding what the pain points and the journey of that customer is. And if you love them, you'll pick up all these things. It won't be like, I got to pay for some user research study or all these, like you'll be in the audience or in the customer community yourself. And as a result, you'll find other things you can sell to them over time. And it will be authentic. And so, love your customer is a really critical piece. On the CAGR website, I have 12 values, and those are really the kind of the broader pieces. And, I oscillate between those, like which ones are like kind of the driving force in a particular season, kind of an annual, biannual basis. But love your customer is so, so important to all of this, because if you pick the wrong audience, I think you probably give up before you find the success you might be looking for.
Yeah, for sure. So what is your stance on the customer is always right?
Well, first, I would segment what business or industry are you in. A lot of times it's B2B versus B2C. I do a fair amount of B2G related work these days. So that's business to government. So first, I think you kind of break that, distribute that. If your customer is the government, they probably are almost always right. The way they do procurement and bidding and what have you, they probably will dictate what's right. And if they're not, you probably don't have a ton of leverage in the short term to right the ship. So anyway, that's more of an aside. But for the more typical use cases, I believe that the customer's intention is almost always right, but they're not always informed. They're not always, there's all sorts of reasons why they may want something that's not in your best interest to service long term. I have a thesis, and again, these are my focus points, not things that I think others should necessarily follow. But I don't invest in any businesses that don't have a recurring revenue stream baked into how you're solving a problem for that customer. Some things you could argue are pseudo subscriptions or what have you. If you're Starbucks and you kind of created this habit forming piece, they don't necessarily charge a subscription, but the recurrence of solving that problem is quite high. And so, products where there's no naturally recurring need to solve that problem, like I kind of just, don't look at that. Sometimes customers want you to solve a problem that is not recurring. I think you have to, not move in a place of scarcity and say like, oh, they want me to do that, got to solve that thing, or this customer is going to break up with me, so I have to solve this problem. And having enough clarity and confidence to say, no, hey, remember, this is our relationship, right? That's why I love that metaphor. You want to establish a healthy relationship. And so, imagine you're, with your significant other or what have you, and this person's always telling you what to do and you don't have like an equal voice. Most people would say that's not a healthy relationship. And so my view on the customer is always right is we should assume that they are well-intentioned, but they might not always be the most well-informed.
That is probably the most eloquent answer to that question I've ever heard.
Yeah.
I love that well-intentioned, but maybe not well-informed. And it's our job as the business owner,
Yeah.
to frame that context for them. And it's crazy when people have context, how much more agreeable they are when they understand, kind of the communication triangle. We didn't have the context when we share that. So
Exactly. And
yeah, I
that's
love
during the
that.
sales cycle, during delivery, and through support, right? It's at all stages.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So you've worked at two highly successful and well-known companies, Amazon and Microsoft. It's all, I've had people on here that had positions pretty high up in Google, and even somebody that was one of the founding members of AOL before it was really AOL. So for us that haven't worked at those large, household name tech companies, you always look in and think, wow, it's Shangri-La, and it's the land of the promise, all that. What learnings from the roles you had there did you find to coincide with those thoughts that people looking from the outside in have? And then what did you also learn while you were in there that were lessons that, wow, I don't want to bring these to my own business?
Yeah.
These are, they're
Well,
not
the
getting this right.
latter is the longer list.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the strengths are really powerful. And I would split your question really into three. There are things that I think are positives in these companies that you can't really replicate, things that are positives that you can, and things we probably shouldn't try to mimic. And the danger of being too competitor focused in general is you don't really know how the food's being made in the kitchen. You kind of see the exterior, and it's always kind of dangerous to overly mimic. But first off, I think one of the things that people inside those big companies don't always acknowledge, even I didn't acknowledge this at one point, or two big things. Number one, you have all this brand equity that, when you're trying to do biz dev or what have you, you're not special. Anybody who has that, email address is going to get a response. Sure. And you just you can't have any of your ego tied on I'm really good at outreach. No. That you have not proven that, simply by pointing to those responses. Another piece is the power of an established distribution or sales channel should not be underestimated.
Yeah.
There are plenty of times that, even I worked on products where, we were highly successful on launching a new product or new version of a product. And, we could pat ourselves on the back, and we have a team offsite lunch and all these little things where, you get some swag and everybody gets a new hoodie and blah, blah, blah. But really what's going on there is the ability to just, slot a product into a proven kind of sales channel. And had that product had to live on its own, it likely wouldn't have made it, right? And so we just have to be honest with ourselves, I think, with some of those pieces. So those are two of the big ones where if you're inside one of those organizations, kind of keeping yourself honest, I think will help you build a better muscle. Two of the things that are really powerful, and this is kind of the core thesis of how I invest and how I try to add value to some of the companies that I support, is the idea of operationalizing kind of the lean startup. And many folks have read that book or a version of that book. For folks who aren't familiar, it really talks about moving fast and iterating your way to success. And there's plenty of good kind of short summaries as well. But it's I love books that aren't popular in the moment, but start to resurface every few years, because sometimes the 50-year-old book actually has the best information, and a lot of the new books are just regurgitating those same frameworks with more modern words. But that book isn't that old, maybe 10 years, a bit more. But one of the core tenets is that you have to continually run experiments. We talked about failure. It's that double your failure rate, double your success rate. And so there are all sorts of ways to think about that. And those, and plenty of startups talk about that. What I find in some of these large companies that are very successful, they actually operationalize that, right? Like they turn that into a process where we're going to show up and we are going to predictably, figure out if this idea is good or bad based upon our customer signal, the experiments that we gain, both anecdotal, quantitative data, that, in my software world, we have the luxury of being able to instrument the product to collect data. If you have something, whether it's a food service business or something out in the real world, there are all sorts of other ways for you to collect data. But at some point, you have to go run experiments, and you have to do it way faster than you probably think you do, right? I like to say enterprises move in months and years. Medium-sized business moves in, weeks and months, and, startups and small businesses need to move in hours. And if you bring your old corporate mentality to starting a new business, I just think many times you're squandering one of the biggest advantages you have, in that you don't have all this decision bureaucracy to navigate. And so you should create a process to have a thesis or have some type of experiment hypothesis, go run the experiment, look at the data, and then go, kind of sanity check it with your customer and just create this flywheel. And I believe in most cases, you will iterate your way to success way better. And so some of these big companies really do a great job at operationalizing that. Another piece there, and this one's not surprising, but it's a good reminder, is that when you have a strong writing culture, it forces a lot of inefficiency out of the system. And I, as part of my job, many times I'm in what's called a data room. And these are all the documents that someone has pulled together on whether, somebody might want to invest or acquire a company. And it's very clear to me, typically in like 20, 30 minutes of digging through this, like, is this a writing culture centric company? And if it's not, it's a huge flag to me, because it means there's probably a ton of inefficiency on how the teams communicate. So, very practical example, when I worked at Amazon, most meetings, if you have a 60-minute meeting, it starts with a 20-minute document read. And the writer or the people who write that document, typically their names aren't on the document. So there's no credit like, I just wrote this document. Yeah. You read this document, you leave comments and questions in line in the tool as you read. The authors of the document go reply to those comments as you go. And then, 20 to 30 minutes of the meeting is just reading, commenting, reading the replies to the comment. That's it. And then you have 30 minutes of discussion around 2 or 3 obviously prioritized topics, because now everyone has the right context. And it helps people have different cognitive or communication styles show up in their voice. It forces the presenter or whoever, the document writer, to not be lazy. They can't just freestyle their way through the conversation. And it's just one of those things where if you can establish the right type of communication cadence for whatever your business is, a frontline worker business versus a bunch of knowledge workers, maybe it's a different, kind of priority. But for the businesses that I am around and invest in, that writing culture is critical. And then wrapping up your question, things not to do. The idea that you can't kill a product because, we put it out there, we announced it. We have to give it more people. It's just the silliest thing. Sure. And, sometimes you just make a bad sandwich, and like, you should not force yourself to eat it. Like, there's just horrible advice. And so we should give ourselves permission to quit. And I've seen that many, many times. Sometimes it's, it's executive ego. Sometimes folks are building little fiefdoms. Like, there's all sorts of dysfunction for why it happens. We shouldn't, replicate that in smaller businesses. And then finally, and this is one of the things that for me, I hold deeply as a priority and value. Many times in a big company, they will kind of chase the biggest dollar. And I worked for some pretty good managers. I had, I think I got lucky, and every direct manager I've had, kind of working in a big company, has been excellent. And then every skip level manager has been, pretty good. But regardless, what folks many times are struggling with is they're trying to grow P&L. And so it's like, we could go solve this problem for customer A or for customer B. And, many times they just pick whoever's going to pay the most, right? Or who's going to be the easiest to sell to. And increasingly, I think we're in a world that is more purpose-driven, that's more mission-driven, and your ability to retain customers are going to be kind of based on, like, why did you show up in the first place? And for me, I have a theme that I believe that predictable financial independence can be achieved through business ownership. And that is kind of my theme. And so as a result, there's many things that deals I look at where it's like, it's not a bad deal. I potentially should invest in that, but I'm not building for enterprise customers. Like, people sometimes say like, we sell to Fortune 500s. That's not my people. Yeah. And so I know I'm likely going to add more volatility to my cash flow, or I might be chasing smaller deals or like some type of discount. And I believe that as an option is a really powerful thing. It doesn't mean you should choose that. You don't have to follow my path, but the fact that that's on the table is something that's almost never on the table at a big company. And so I really love the fact that, there's a lot of these good process operational pieces, but the why and the how you show up is, I think, what we can take advantage of as the smaller companies.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that answer. Hey, everyone. As you know, I don't have any advertisements nor sponsorships on this podcast. My only ask of you, the listener, is that you share this podcast with someone that you know, a friend, a family member, a coworker, or a colleague who may benefit from this information, may benefit from today's guest, from the value that they're sharing with the audience, with you, the listener. When you share this podcast and our audience grows, it allows me to book more and more guests who have a great message, great nuggets of wisdom that you can benefit from, and again, your network can benefit from. So please, right now, push that share button, send it to somebody that you care about, and let's get back to the interview. I'd like to just revisit the writing culture real quickly. So I've read a couple books on Amazon and very familiar with that process of, it's quiet for 20 minutes as you read through, and then you discuss it for 30 or 40 minutes. But can you give it just so I can get my head around it and the audience can as well? How else would you define then a writing culture? Because what I heard you say is that's a strong indicator of, even if you would consider it investment worthy. And so what would other evidence of a writing culture be for a business?
Yeah, so I'll iterate through a quick few examples. One, if I ask a team, hey, can you point me to whatever your knowledge management wiki tool is, your SharePoint, Google Doc, like it doesn't really matter what the technology is, that's indifferent. Hopefully it's somewhat organized, but just point me to it. And you can see the cadence at which the documents are published, and it'll tell you a story. You can see the formatting. It doesn't have to be a particular format, but you'll see if the formatting is consistent. At Amazon, there's 2, 4, and 6 pagers. There's very specific things that on how they show up. And so how predictable the artifacts are published and presented is a huge tell. Another piece is if you, I look for the versions, right? And it's a little trickier with some of the newer document tools because sometimes the versioning is kind of baked in. But when it's done properly, the document isn't that, all the minions are writing the document and they present to, the overlords. The better way to look at it is there is a decision that likely needs to be made. And if it's a report or something like that, you probably shouldn't be writing a document. You should just go wire up a real-time dashboard and let people go get the answer on their own. So typically a document is required because you're making a decision or you have made a material decision, or you're blocked in some way, to making a decision. And that means that by the time it gets to someone very senior, it should be, as some politicians call, it should be an impossible decision, right? By the time a decision gets to the president, it's probably not an easy decision because otherwise somebody else would have made it already. And so part of the document writing process is to create a first version, and maybe a small team of 6 people are kind of organizing that. Then their manager reviews that doc. Then their manager reviews that doc. And by the time it gets to, a director or a VP, it should increasingly become a smaller section of a future doc because you're just saying, hey, FYI, here are 3 sentences on what we did. Here's the outcome, right? And it's very structured. Here's the context. As a reminder, you read a lot of docs. Here was the outcome of this. And then here's the impact on the business. And it's very crisp. You don't have a document for that. But if that process is not yielding the obvious decision, you use all of these various stages of checks and balances to keep digging and forcing more clarity of thought. And what I find is places that don't force that clarity of thought, they let people just rumble through each other. And it's almost like, I don't know if there's causation here, but there's almost like an inverse correlation of kind of meeting time and document, writing quality. And anytime I see like a bunch of meetings, like I have people do this as well. It's like, hey, would you mind showing me your calendar? Right. And these are deals, right, where I have the ability to get access to this. And so I'm like in this very privileged place to like see like, how do you really run this? And if I see a bunch of those recurring icons all over their calendar, I'm like, why? Right. And so then that's, I try to show up in a more empathetic way, and I'm not there to like interrogate, but typically it's a sign that there's not the right level of hygiene on clarity of thought. And lastly, I'll say is, as a company gets larger, it doesn't have to be very large. Like once you break, a dozen or so folks, there are going to be information gaps where person A doesn't have the same, information as person B, or you hire somebody new and they obviously weren't at all those meetings, and they're not going to go back and listen to a bunch of Zoom recordings or read a bunch of summaries. And so the onboarding process of saying, hey, welcome to the team. I want you to spend the next 3 days looking through this folder and reading these documents. And you have this memorialized kind of narrative there, but also you don't get into this place where if you're not in the club, if you don't get into this meeting, you don't get the information. And so that's a kind of a myriad reasons of why this is all goodness. And again, it's just so many gaps it exposes when they don't have it.
Man, that is powerful. The correlation, and it's inversely related to the amount of meetings, and then do you have a writing culture? I've never thought of it that way. And you said something else. You just absolute knowledge bomb is by the time a decision is pushed up to a CEO, president, it was your example, but a CEO, like that should be close to an impossible decision, because if we've empowered our teams and pushed that decision-making down into our organizations, you shouldn't be hearing about a lot of that. And I think, and this message is going out to all the, entrepreneurs that are building a company, because what LaSean has just shared is absolute truth around, if you're not intentional around building this writing culture up front, it is a lot harder to go back and fix that and ingrain that if it wasn't from the start. And the value of the business is, as you just spoke eloquently to, the value of the business is more. And that's something, right, personally, I'm going to take back and check myself on. That's great wisdom. So you speak, one of the things that you talk about and write about is artificial intelligence. Of course, it is the buzzword right now, right? AI.
Right.
But man, I just, it's funny how things happen. The universe conspires. I literally saw something today that I said, damn, that is true words have never been spoken. AI is not going to take your job, but somebody using AI probably will.
Right.
And that's like, that summed it up for me, for people that are worried about losing their job, then figure out how to use it, because it's not going away. So where do you see, and big open question here, but I would love to just to wrap a little bit about, where do you see next 5 years? I think 10 years is too far for anybody to predict, but the next 5 years, business, specifically business, and more specifically small to mid-sized businesses, where do you see AI playing a role in? And I'm sure it's industry specific, but if you had to generalize, where do you see AI playing a role in small to mid-sized businesses?
Sure. Well, as we think about AI, I like to kind of break it up, because not surprisingly, I've been talking to quite a few folks around this and starting to evolve and refine, give myself permission to kind of attack my old idea. I love the concept of being dialectic, and that's just arguing against yourself. So you create both. It's basically a debate within yourself. And so I try to argue both sides. And so I have kind of 3 buckets. It's like the philosophy, the framework, and then the tactics. And Naval Ravikant, who has this, he's an entrepreneur and now kind of more business philosopher. He talks about 4 types of business leverage. There's capital, there's labor, there is media, and there's technology. And each of these give you a lever to amplify your impact. And where how I look at AI through the philosophical lens is that it's going to be this new, almost exponential piece of leverage that, kind of sits in the technology bucket. And if you look over time, what happens to, those 4 buckets? Well, when you used to have a farm that, let's say it has 100 acres, you needed X amount of people to go, kind of harvest that farm. Well, when you get some new tractor or some new piece of technology, now maybe you need 30 people or 20 people, or, these numbers shift. because of the leverage. And so I believe smaller companies are going to be able to provide the level of value that you would previously only find in very large companies. And for the large companies, that sounds scary. But for the people working in those companies, don't fret. Like, there will be other opportunities for you. And for the entrepreneurs who are, running and growing small to medium-sized businesses, you should rejoice, because you're going to have the opportunity to go, compete against large players that you never could, because they were in a world where labor and capital were the biggest levers, and increasingly, media and technology. And by the way, media is, you can look at that in the traditional form of media. I look at it through the lens of, organic marketing and content, everything from a YouTube channel to a podcast to, social media. These are different ways for you to create leverage, whether it's, deal flow, inbound sales, like all sorts of things become more cost effective when you kind of figure out your right combination of these 4 levers. And so I start with the philosophy there. Now I'm getting to the framework. All right, so, okay, sure, LaSean, that sounds good. AI's a lever. Big whoop. I think jumping into like whatever the daily news of AI is almost overwhelming, because like every day it's like, oh my goodness, this thing does this and this thing does this. And It's hard to sometimes parse the timeline. So right now, there's a whole segment of investment called labor as a service. And these are humanoid robots that physically can be trained to do warehouse work, to drop fries. Like, there's all sorts of things that they can do. A couple of startups, Sanctuary, Figure, these companies are kind of building a new platform for you to load software as a task, and now you just hire these machines, right? Well, that was what people were talking about a month ago. Next month, there's going to be this whole thing, like, how do I figure it out? Yeah. The actionable, framework I would give folks is to go way back to this discipline called business process management, BPM. And this, people are going to be like, well, that has nothing to do with AI. I'm like, exactly. And back in the 80s and 90s, BPM consultants were sent into businesses to effectively figure out how to optimize their business process, right? And, first they would have to document it. They'd have to go talk to all the various stakeholders and get clarity. And they charge a lot of money to just figure out, like, okay, this is how we used to make a bottle of Coca-Cola. With this new, understanding of the process, we can drive these efficiencies. Well, if you're a small company, you don't need big consultants. You need to pay anybody. You just need to go figure out what's your, short or simplest way to go document your process. And the first piece is, like, if you say, like, oh my goodness, I have so many processes, that should be a flag. If you're a small business and you got a ton of process, something is wrong. You need to have a small number of processes. And then once you have that process identified, what you're looking for are all the discrete tasks and the handoff points from each. And so whether you, write this down in notes on your notes app on your phone, you go write a more structured document, or you actually go spend some real time putting together something a bit more in depth, like, the fidelity of the content doesn't matter. The goal is to get your process identified and then figure out how do you measure each of these tasks along the way. And that part is super, super critical, because once you've done that, we talked about AI as a lever. Now we say, documenting your process, identify the tasks in there, and then how do you measure each? Now you just take the top priority tasks there, and that's your rubric or your filter for all of these AI services. And so if someone says, I have, let's say you're in direct sales and you have sales development reps, there is a new tool that does AI-based SDR. And so folks in that space would know it. If you say, no, my issue is I don't have low-skilled workers to go flip the burgers. Well, Miso Robotics and other folks, they have a robot you can buy or lease. And, I'm giving very coarse examples,
Sure.
But the point is, if you deeply understand your process, you're going to know that I'm on the hunt to solve or automate these 3 tasks, instead of letting all of the random noise come to you about AI. Should I generate, graphic design in Canva, or should I use ChatGPT to, write, emails? Don't worry about that. Focus on the process. And I found with that clarity, even folks who are not, don't have a deep technical background, they can pretty quickly understand, it's like, is this sci-fi? Is this something for me to check back in a few months or years? Or is this top of mind? I need to go dig in, and maybe I'll go schedule a call or get a demo.
That is probably the most actionable advice I've heard on AI for small business. That is, no, that's, again,
And I've
this
had
is
to
one
use
of
it
the,
myself, right?
well,
So
I mean, this is one of those podcasts. I'm telling the listeners, this is one of those podcasts that you listen to, but it's like reading a great book. You go back and re-listen to it because everything LaSean is saying around documentation, around this writing culture, on how to filter your three best priorities and business. I call it process mapping. Same thing. You like these are fundamentals that so many people get going in business and then have to go back, and it's so much harder when you have to go back. And you're literally giving a masterclass right now on how do you set up your business from the beginning to win.
yeah,
So
refactoring can be challenging. One thing I would add to this, specific to the small business, is the media cycle around AI is largely driven by the companies that can afford to pitch to these companies or to
sure,
the media companies, right? And so, not surprisingly, OpenAI and Microsoft and a bunch of companies that I don't have anything against, but we should be thoughtful on what products and what use cases they're promoting. It's to go and sell their products, right? And so, to make this very a bit more tangible, Microsoft has a new product or a new class of products called Copilot. And they basically are taking Copilot and saying, this is a new little chat pane that you can use to kind of supercharge the apps you already use. So there's Copilot for Windows. There's Copilot for the Office suite. There's Copilot for their business applications. There's Copilot for their coding experience, like all of these things. Now, that's all good. When you buy Copilot, it costs you $30 per employee. Now, here's the punchline. These large software companies who build many times what are called software as a service products, SaaS products, they largely monetize those SaaS products on a per employee or per user basis, right? And so they're all about pushing the media narrative like this is the new tool you have to look at. One of the hacks that I'm like very bullish in is looking at your process as a small business and the tasks that you can remove a human all the way, like maybe there's high human error in that particular thing, or it's very tedious and humans don't like doing it, or what have you. And many times you can find tools that are very low cost to solve that problem if there's no human involved, because it might be something like Zapier that's doing workflow automation, and it's taking anytime somebody enters something in this spreadsheet, go and actually complete this other task. And those types of tools many times are not per employee tools, right? And so the media cycle isn't promoting those as heavily, but sometimes those can drive the most ROI for your business. And so I just call that out as don't assume that the list of tools that are going to help your business grow are the ones being promoted, because sometimes they're just not getting the press cycle.
You're not suggesting that big business and the government drives the news cycle, are you? Come on.
What are we saying here?
What? LaSean, your book, A Values-Based Business Design, when an author sets out to write a book, he or she has a purpose. Like, I want to help people understand, this, that, or the other. And I know I can help that. When you sat down and you started typing, what was your goal when you started writing that book?
Well, writing a book isn't typically going to get you rich or, get you extra sleep hours. But for me, there are kind of three general customers that I love, calling back to our earlier point.
Yeah.
Folks who are being intentional about building their personal or their financial wellness life plan. People who are inside, smaller big companies trying to build new products, and, entrepreneurs who are trying to find a more predictable way to grow. And I don't look at those that different, as far as kind of what my connection is, because I'm trying to give them the systems and the frameworks for them to be more successful. And those just happen to be places along my journey where I've had, experiences that really mattered. And that middle audience, people who are trying to build new products, that's what that book was for. And I found myself, in mentoring sessions, talking to folks, and like repeating the same, kind of points of view. And, the punchline, so folks don't have to buy my book, it is really straightforward. Listen, if you're going to start a new business today, you should not copy the way companies were created back in the day where they were product first, and then they kind of worked their way into the why, right? And there's a couple of examples of companies that have done masterful jobs at that. And the why, if you've read like Simon Sinek or any of these types of authors, it's basically saying like, this is why we exist. And then here's how we show up to go execute that. And then here's some products for sale, right? That's the more modern way. The inverse, what we see a lot of times is here's what's for sale. And then the why is like way over here somewhere, if at all. But two great examples are Nike and Apple, right? Like when you see the everyday athlete, or you see the Think Different, or these campaigns that embody a lot of the why in like really short copywriting. I like really think that's really fantastic. I love the VAN framework, where it's like you take a verb, adjective, and a noun, and like that's what you are like promoting as the problem you're solving, or flipping that, like just do it. These types of businesses, they start with the why. And then as a result, Nike can sell you all sorts of things. Apple can sell you all sorts of things. And so the premise of my book is, in today's world, you don't just start with the why of the pain point, you also start with the why of the values. And you want to, kind of really think about why, if you were to humanize this business, what kind of core human values would it embody? And again, asking that question, are you willing to go out of business to protect those? And if you really believe that statement, you will create processes so you'll never go out of business.
Yeah.
Right. And as a result, you'll have this promise that most businesses can't compete with. Right. And you see it happen. I was a consultant for Tom's Shoes years ago, and they got into a kind of a sticky situation because they had made this promise: every shoe you buy, we buy another pair of shoes for someone in need in an emerging market. But like at a certain point, they wanted to go down market in the shoes. There wasn't enough margin to actually justify. So like they had to go figure out: do we invest in R&D to build a cheaper shoe? Do we break this promise? Like there's all sorts of things where it's like kind of hard to undo this if you don't, if you're not really thoughtful. But they had a great why. It just, operationally, they came to a point where they had to say, are we going to stick to this or not? And there's another great one as a CPG, a consumer product goods company. I think it was Johnson & Johnson. They had made a promise that for every X amount of products, they would go plant a tree. And it turned out this was starting to get very expensive. And they're like, oh, crap, I think we're going to have to break this rule. And so the fact that large companies are really bad at sticking to these value-based promises, to me, is why it's a lever for small businesses to compete. Because increasingly people will choose product A over product B if it is value or purpose driven, and they feel a deep, authentic connection to that. And so you still got to do all the basics, right? You still need core value proposition. You need customers with willingness to pay. Like you need all the fundamentals. But if you start with articulating your values, you're not just another cookie company. You're not just another sneaker company. You're not just, insert here. You have a narrative. And I also love that because, you could have 3 cookie companies on the same block and they could all have a line out the door if they're values driven. If they're not, you're going to try to compete on advertising or maybe, brand impressions, or like it gets really wonky, and you're kind of using capital as your way to maintain the relationship. And so to go back to that, metaphor earlier in this conversation, paying your way to keep your relationship healthy is probably not going to lead to a long-term healthy relationship.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. So I love to read. A huge fan of business, self-help books, biographies especially. I see a wall of books behind you. So I would love to know, and I'm sure there are many, but is there 1 or 2 books that you read, you set it down, and you said, my gosh, my life will never be the same. I will never think about this subject the same way ever. Is there 1 or 2 that you could share with the listeners that they could go grab it to benefit?
Yeah, there's a ton of great business books. I think if you're the type of person who needs a framework, that really helps me, because like if you give me the process, I can go deal with the ambiguity. And so I won't go through that list, because that's probably some of the books that previous guests or that you have shared in the past. But One book has nothing to do with business at all.
That's fine. That's fine.
And it's called The Story Equation. And what I love, it's about writing. And so it's about, storytelling. And it's more about fiction writing, but I've used it quite often in pitches, pitch decks, and other types of things. But the punchline of the book is, if you look at a great kind of transformative story of a protagonist in a narrative story, we know the hero's journey and story arcs and
Sure.
3 and 4 act structure. But what this talks about is many times at the core of the motivation of why Luke Skywalker goes on this mission or what have you, is that we believe a great lie. And basically there's an event that happens, in a character's, storyline, maybe when they're young or at some previous point, and something happens and we justify or we believe it happened for a different reason. And it's a lie. And it puts us on this path. And part of our transformation is to realize that it was a lie, right? And so you can kind of come full circle and realize, oh goodness, I was motivated and driven by this thing that wasn't really even what I thought it was, right? So I think one of the examples she gives is, imagine there's a child who is in the back seat, and then car gets in the wreck, and they believe that because the parent was talking to them when the wreck happened, that's why their parents died, right? And they go on this whole journey lifelong where all these things, and then they find later on that wasn't even the case, right? There was some other reason why this accident actually occurred. And so many times in both our personal and professional lives, we're anchoring on some moment or some interaction that is just not true, and it's creating some type of limiting belief. And what I love about that book is you could read it in one sitting, but it gives us a story framework to kind of understand why this happens so frequently, and you will see it all, you can't unsee it. After you kind of look at this framework. And so anyway, that's called The Story Equation. The other one is the Growth Mindset book. And I just, if we think about skills, you can go watch YouTube videos, you can read books, you can go hire a coach, you can, take a class. There are so many ways for you to learn a skill. I don't need to tell folks, here's how you go learn to do X. Mostly, I believe what's stopping us is we don't have a growth mindset. We're thinking in scarcity or, instead of abundancy. That's my belief with AI. I think it's a fallacy to think that because humans think in scarcity, that the robots would think in scarcity. They would think in abundance, right? They're just I could just solve the next problem. You all need more energy. Let's get more energy. You need more, more food. Let's grow more food. And so through that lens, I just believe mindset is so critical, even though we know it. It's just how do you get a great body? You eat right, you exercise properly, but you got to have a system to keep doing it. And so that book is really important to me. And then from there, it's pretty straightforward if you have the right support structure to kind of stick it out. And my company is called CAGR. It's not just about the financial implication of that word. It's also how do we compound our time? How do we compound our relationships to get to wherever we have defined as our destination in life?
Love it. Thank you. All right, last couple of questions. If we fast forward to the end of your very full, beautiful life, but it's your time, and we're at your funeral, and you're kind of seeing it from above, and somebody is, a loved one is reading your eulogy, and they were to describe you in just 3 words. They were just to describe LaSean in just 3 words. What words would you hope they would use to describe the life you lived?
I was going to try to be pithy and turn it into a sentence, but my brain's not thinking
noun,
fast
adjective,
enough.
or verb, adjective, noun, right?
Yeah, the Van concept. I would actually shorten it down to 1 word, and it would be curious. And that's the unlock for my whole life. And I heard, I think this was Paul Graham. He said that the ultimate motivation or the ulterior motive for starting a startup is curiosity. Yeah, because like if you're always learning, you will solve most of the challenges that surface running a small business or, founding a startup. And for me, if you look at my windy background, it's mostly just because, I've been curious. And when we have a curious mind, we expose ourselves to more opportunity, and it's a lot easier to find, that overlap. Your audience is probably familiar with the ikigai concept of like, what are you good at? What does the world value? And then what do you enjoy? Sometimes you can do something that you don't enjoy that you're actually good at. And the tighter that Venn diagram, the closer they can be overlapped, ideally, the more fulfilling the work that you do. And I believe that if you increase the curiosity cycles, it's just easier to find a way to close those circles instead of saying, you know what, my mom was an accountant, so now I'm an accountant. Maybe you will love being an accountant, but you should go double check. And I think curiosity is a huge unlock.
And I would only pontificate that if the world were more curious, we probably would have less wars and less issues because we'd be genuinely curious about other people and want to understand their point of view. And yeah. For sure. So, gosh, I hope I didn't just bait you with an answer for the last question. But if you had a magic wand and you could wave it and make one material change to our world as we know it, how would the world be different according to LaSean?
Well, I won't say that AI is the magical wand, but I do think the thinking behind AI is going to spark a real change. So what I always stroke with my magic wand, I actually do think it's coming. That many of the things that we fight over today, most of our wars are, there's ego and there's other things, but mostly it's about natural resources. It's energy, it is real estate, all the issues happening right now in the Middle East. Like these are typically, that's my land. No, it's my land. I need this oil. No, I need this oil. And all of it comes from a point of either scarcity or, some type of claim, right? Like this is mine because of X, Y, Z, reasons. And I don't think those will go away. I mean, the human condition, probably won't eliminate those things, but I do believe that many of the financially driven conflicts that we have will largely be called out in a world where things are so abundant. And so I'm a big believer that energy storage, energy generation, these types of things are going to reshape kind of like our geopolitical lines, because if, America will stick here, can generate most of our energy, many of the wars that we fight on behalf of others, we actually wouldn't do. Like we'll say we're doing it for one reason, but we really need some energy. And so the idea that the world is abundant is, I think, really critical. And then getting away from, the geopolitics and the economics of it, like as an individual human, to wake up in the morning and say, okay, there's a path for me to have high quality education, healthcare, housing, without me being stressed out. I just think in 100 years, folks are going to look at us like you look at a episode of Game of Thrones and you're like,
sure,
how did they survive back then? It was just like so silly. And they were like doing all of this just to make enough money, to put gas in a car, to drive to a building, to do work on it's just going to seem so silly. And so I'm excited. Those types of transitions are always messy. They generate fear, anxiety, but I'm really excited that, maybe not the next generation, but the next 2 or 3 generations are going to live in a world where kind of resource scarcity is not what's limiting us. It's really just our own imagination.
Love it. Most important question: where can people find you, follow you, connect with you?
Yeah. So as I said, I'm all about helping people find a predictable path to financial independence through business ownership. For some people, that's buying a company. For some people, that's starting a company. For some people, that's buying into a system, whether it's a franchise or what have you. I'm not an expert on all the options, but I have a pretty good handle on the process to help you kind of find your own best decision. And so if you want to have a more serious conversation, you can reach out to our group email. That's grow@cagr.com. If you want to have a more casual conversation, you can find me on X at LASEAN.
Fantastic. And we'll put that in the show notes too, so that people can, your book recommendations and your book, and then also where they can get a hold of you.
Yeah.
LaSean, thank you so much for being generous with your time, but more importantly, thank you for being so generous with your knowledge. My life is better off for having, I'm being dead serious, better off for having spent this hour with you. And it's made me, as you've talked, I'm thinking, I need to go back and do this better. I need to go back and do this better. I need to tighten that up, because you're so eloquent in the way you explain it, but matter of fact too. And I just appreciate your knowledge. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate you making the time to hang out. And I like to say, I'm just the DJ. I didn't write these songs. I'm just remixing them, and hopefully I can move the dance floor.
It's all in the remix though, brother. It's all in the remix, man. Yeah. Thank you for tuning in to the ThriveMore podcast. Don't forget to take a look at the show notes for any of the resources that we mentioned during the podcast. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you have access to the latest and the greatest. You can connect with me on any of the socials at Real Roger Martin. And be sure to check out our website, ThriveMoreBrands.com. There you'll find information on the brands we support and information on franchising. Thanks again for tuning in.